Some choices don't echo, they hunt you. The wind howled across the alien wasteland, dragging needles of frozen dust against Lucas Reed's faceplate as he forced one boot after another through knee-deep drifts. The temperature reading minus 43 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping fast. Every breath inside his cracked respirator tasting like burnt metal and stale air. His shuttle lay somewhere behind him, half buried and dead. Systems fried by whatever storm ruled this forgotten rock. And all he had left was a failing heater pack, a blinking compass, and the kind of stubbornness that had kept him alive long after better men had quit. Then the signal hit. Faint, irregular, almost lost in the static. Biometric, not mechanical, not human. He froze, heart thudding against his ribs, visor flickering as he triangulated the source just 20 yards ahead beneath a ridge of wind-packed sand. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, voice rough. Because out here signals meant one thing. Trouble. But his feet were already moving. Already climbing. Already choosing. The ridge broke under his weight, and he slid down the other side. Hands digging. Gloves scraping against frozen grains until his fingers struck something smooth. Not stone. Not metal. Skin. He jerked back for half a second. Then leaned in again, brushing away the sand as a faint blue-violet glow pulsed beneath it. Soft but steady like a heartbeat refusing to quit, a face emerged. Not human, but close enough to make his chest tighten. High cheekbones, luminous. Skin shifting like oil on water, lashes rimed with frost. And eyes. When they snapped open, they weren't afraid. They were aware, sharp, ancient, and locked directly onto him as if she'd been waiting. "Don't," she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the wind, but somehow clear inside his helmet. The translator lagging then catching. "If you touch me, you will not walk away from this." Lucas exhaled slowly, a cloud fogging his visor, glancing up at the storm rolling in harder, the sky turning a deep electric gray. Whatever had brought her here wasn't done yet. "Yeah," he said under his breath, more to himself than to her. "Story of my life. He should leave. Any sane man would. Signal for pickup. Mark the coordinates. Let someone else deal with it." But the sand was already creeping back over her shoulders, the cold biting deeper. And there was something in the way she watched him. Not pleading, not begging, just certain. That twisted something old and buried inside his chest, the part that remembered what it meant to choose. He hesitated one last second, then reached out and grabbed her arm. The moment his glove made contact, the world snapped white. Light surged up his sleeve like liquid lightning, his suit alarms detonating in his ears. Temperature spikes, energy spikes, readings he didn't even understand. He staggered back, but didn't let go, her body igniting in that same blue-violet glow, brighter now, alive. The storm above them shifted, not naturally, but as if something vast had just turned its attention. Lucas looked up, breath catching as distant shadows moved behind the clouds. Too precise to be weather, too massive to be anything but ships. His HUD flickered, a new signal screaming across every channel, broadcasting his exact position. And for the first time since he'd crawled out of the wreckage, Lucas Reed understood exactly what he had done. Not just saved a life, but lit a beacon in the dark that something out there had been waiting to see. The sky did not just darken. It focused, like a predator narrowing its gaze. And Lucas felt it in his bones before his instruments confirmed it. Multiple objects descending through the upper atmosphere at impossible speed. Their signatures clean and deliberate. Not drifting like debris, but aligning, tracking, locking onto the signal still pulsing through his suit. Through her, through him. He staggered back a step, breath sharp in his lungs, staring at the woman in front of him as the light beneath her skin began to stabilize into slow, rhythmic pulses, no longer chaotic but controlled, intentional. Her eyes never leaving his as if measuring something far deeper than distance or threat level. "You should have left me buried," she said quietly, her voice stronger now, the translator smoothing her words into something almost human, almost warm, but the meaning carried weight that pressed against his chest. Lucas shook his head once, a short, stubborn motion. "Too late for that," he replied, glancing up again as the clouds parted in thin, unnatural seams, revealing faint silhouettes shaped like blades of light hovering miles above, silent, but watching, always watching. His suit chimed again, proximity alerts stacking faster than he could clear them. "Those yours?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would not make him feel better. She followed his gaze for only a moment before returning it to him. "They are not here for me," she said, and there was something in the way she said it that made the cold feel sharper, more personal. Lucas let out a slow breath, frost gathering along the edges of his visor. "That is not comforting," he muttered, his mind already racing through options that did not exist. His shuttle was gone, his comms were compromised, and now he was standing in the open with the most obvious target. In 3 systems, he took a step closer, lowering his voice instinctively. "Can you move?" For a second she did not answer, as if testing her own body. Then her fingers flexed against the frozen ground, leaving faint trails of light in the sand. She pushed herself upright with a controlled effort, her movements precise but not fully steady. Like someone relearning gravity, Lucas reached out without thinking, then paused halfway. Remembering her warning, she noticed, of course she did, a faint flicker crossing her expression that might have been amusement or something softer. "You are already marked," she said, and before he could respond she placed her hand against his arm again, deliberately this time. The light surged once more, but did not burn. It settled, sinking beneath his skin like warmth in winter, and suddenly the noise in his helmet changed, the static smoothing into clarity, signals aligning, translating, understanding. He inhaled sharply, eyes widening as new data streamed across his display. Symbols resolving into meaning he had never been taught, but somehow knew. Coordinates, trajectories, intentions. He looked up again, and for the first time, he could see them not as distant shadows, but as a formation, precise and patient, waiting for a command that had not yet been given. "What did you do?" he asked, voice low, steady only because he forced it to be. She studied him for a long moment before answering. "I gave you the choice you already made." Lucas let out a quiet, humorless breath, shaking his head slightly. "That is not how choices work," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew something had shifted, not just outside in the sky, but inside him. Something connected, something irreversible. The wind howled louder, sweeping around them in spirals that no longer felt random, and far above one of the silent ships adjusted its position by a fraction, enough to signal awareness, enough to confirm what he feared most. They were not searching anymore. They had found exactly what they were looking for. The silence between the ships and the storm felt heavier than the wind itself, like the entire sky was holding its breath, waiting for him to make another mistake, and Lucas could feel it pressing against his ribs as he stared upward, the new data still streaming across his visor in clean, impossible clarity, every symbol translating itself into meaning that did not belong to him, yet somehow fit perfectly inside his mind. Trajectories mapped in arcs of light, distances measured in miles and seconds, intentions labeled not as guesses but as certainty, and at the center of it all was him, a single blinking point that should not have mattered but suddenly did. "They are waiting," he said quietly, more to the numbers than to her, because the pattern was obvious now. No weapons deployed, no sudden descent, just position and patience, like hunters who already knew the outcome. She stepped closer, her presence no longer fragile but composed, the glow beneath her skin dimming into a steady, controlled shimmer that pulsed in time with something he could almost hear. "They are waiting for you to run," she replied, and there was no mockery in her voice, only observation. Lucas let out a slow breath, glancing across the barren landscape that stretched for miles in every direction, frozen dunes and fractured rock formations that offered no real cover, nowhere to hide from something that could see through atmosphere and sand alike. "And if I do not?" he asked, shifting his weight as the wind pushed harder against him. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with that same unsettling focus. "Then they will learn," she said. Lucas frowned, the word catching in his mind like a loose wire. "Learn what?" he asked, but she did not answer right away. Instead, she reached down and pressed her palm lightly against the surface of the sand, the glow spreading outward in faint lines that traced patterns he recognized from the data on his visor. Coordinates, pathways, connections, the ground itself becoming a map, his map. "You see them now," she said finally, her voice softer, almost thoughtful, "not as shapes, not as shadows, but as choices." Lucas swallowed, his throat dry despite the cold. because she was right. He could see it, not just where they were, but what they were doing, how they adjusted, how they responded, how every movement in the sky was a question directed at him. "I did not ask for this," he said under his breath, and for a moment the words felt smaller than they should have. She looked up at him then, really looked, as if peeling back layers he had spent years building. "No," she agreed. "But you answered anyway." The wind shifted again, sharper now, carrying a faint hum that did not belong to the storm, and Lucas turned instinctively toward it, his visor highlighting a descending object far off to the east, smaller than the others, moving faster, not part of the formation but separate, deliberate. His pulse quickened. "That one is not waiting," he said, his voice tightening as the trajectory line drew itself straight toward their position. She followed his gaze, and for the first time since he had found her, something changed in her expression, not fear, not exactly, but urgency. "No," she said quietly. "That one is curious." Lucas let out a short breath that almost turned into a laugh, because somehow that felt worse. "That is supposed to make me feel better?" he asked, but she was already moving, stepping past him with a precision that cut through the chaos of the storm, her hand reaching back without looking, finding his wrist as if she had always known where it would be. "Come," she said, not as a command, but as something closer to inevitability. And when she pulled him forward, the world did not resist. The wind parted just enough, the sand shifting beneath their boots in patterns that matched the glowing lines spreading from her touch, guiding them across terrain that moments ago had been empty and now revealed subtle depressions, hidden paths, the outline of something buried just beneath the surface. Lucas felt his breath catch as his visor confirmed it, a structure. Artificial, ancient, shielded from scans until now. "You knew this was here," he said, trying to keep pace as they moved. She did not slow down. "I hoped," she replied, and there was something in that word that made the connection between them tighten, not physical, but something deeper, something that felt like shared weight, shared consequence. Behind them, the descending object cut through the clouds, its outline sharpening against the gray sky, and Lucas did not need the data to understand anymore. Whatever this was, whatever she had brought him into, it had already begun. The ground gave way beneath his boots with a hollow echo that did not belong to sand or stone, and Lucas felt it before he understood it, a subtle shift in pressure, a vibration that traveled up through his legs and into his chest like the planet itself was waking up. The glowing lines beneath Seris's hand flared brighter, spreading outward in precise geometric patterns that cut through the frozen terrain, and then the surface split, not violently but deliberately, panels of compacted earth, sliding aside to reveal a narrow descent carved from something smooth and dark, untouched by time or weather. Lucas stopped at the edge, breath fogging his visor as he stared down into the opening where faint blue light pulsed in slow, steady intervals, mirroring the rhythm beneath her skin. "That was not there a minute ago," he said quietly, his voice edged with disbelief he could not quite hide. Seris did not look back, her grip on his wrist steady as ever. "It does not appear for those who do not see," she replied, and there was no arrogance in her tone, only a simple statement of fact that somehow made the air feel heavier. Lucas glanced over his shoulder as the descending object above broke through the cloud layer, its shape resolving into something sleek and deliberate, not massive like the others but sharper, focused, its path unwavering as it cut toward their position. His visor marked the distance dropping fast, miles collapsing into seconds. "We are out of time," he said, turning back to the opening. Seris stepped forward without hesitation, pulling him with her as they crossed the threshold, and the moment his boot touched the interior surface, the wind vanished, cut off as if someone had closed a door on the storm itself. The temperature shifted instantly, no longer biting but cool and controlled, the air carrying a faint metallic taste that reminded him of powered systems long dormant. The entrance sealed behind them with a soft, seamless motion, leaving only the dim blue glow that lined the walls in thin, continuous bands. Lucas exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping a fraction, as the constant howl outside faded into memory, but the tension did not leave, it only changed shape. "Please tell me this place is friendly," he muttered, scanning the corridor that stretched ahead in perfect symmetry, no visible seams, no exposed wiring, just smooth surfaces that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Seris released his wrist then, stepping forward with a familiarity that suggested recognition rather than discovery, her fingers brushing lightly along the wall as if greeting something old, something patient. "It is not hostile," she said, and after a brief pause added, "If you are not." Lucas let out a quiet breath that almost turned into a laugh. "That is a comfort I am not sure I deserve," he said, following her deeper into the structure as the corridor curved gently downward, the light responding to their movement, brightening just enough to guide their path. His visor struggled to map the space, readings conflicting, dimensions shifting in ways that did not align with standard geometry, and yet his mind, still linked to whatever she had awakened in him, began to adjust, translating the impossible into something he could navigate. "This is older than anything I have ever seen," he said, reaching out to hover his hand near the surface without touching it. Feeling a faint warmth radiating outward like a slow heartbeat, Seris slowed slightly, glancing back at him for the first time since they entered, her eyes softer now, less guarded. "It was built before your species learned to leave its sky," she said, and there was no judgment in the statement, only distance. Lucas nodded once, absorbing that as best he could while continuing forward, deeper into a place that should not have existed. Behind them, far above, the pursuing craft reached the surface, its signal piercing through layers of rock and structure, a sharp, curious presence pressing against the boundary of whatever shelter they had found. Lucas felt it like a distant pressure against his thoughts, not invasive but insistent, searching, learning, and as he stepped beside Seris at the base of the corridor where the space opened into something vast and silent, he realized with a slow, tightening certainty that this place was not just hiding them, it was watching too. The chamber opened around them like a held breath finally released, vast and impossibly quiet, its curved walls rising hundreds of feet into shadow where faint lines of blue light traced slow, deliberate patterns that shifted as Lucas watched, not randomly but with purpose, like a language he could almost understand if he let himself look long enough. His boots echoed softly against the smooth floor, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the space itself. And for a moment he forgot the storm, the ships, everything outside, because this place felt still, not dead, not abandoned, but waiting. "This is not just a shelter," he said under his breath, the realization settling into him with a weight that felt heavier than fear. Seris moved ahead of him with quiet certainty, her posture no longer guarded but aligned, as if the structure itself was guiding her movements. Her hand lifted slightly, and the light along the walls responded, brightening in soft waves that rolled outward from her. Lucas watched it happen and felt the same response ripple through his own body, a faint warmth beneath his skin where her touch had changed something fundamental, something that refused to go back. "It knows you," he said, not as a question. She paused then, turning just enough to meet his eyes. "It recognizes what I carry," she replied, and there was something in her tone that made the words feel incomplete, as if the truth extended further than she was willing to say. Lucas took a slow breath, stepping closer to the center of the chamber, where the floor dipped slightly into a circular platform. The light there brighter, more focused, patterns converging into a single point that pulsed in time with the steady rhythm he now felt inside his chest. He hesitated at the edge, instinct warning him even as curiosity pulled him forward. "And what exactly do you carry?" he asked quietly. Seris did not answer immediately. Instead, she stepped onto the platform, the glow beneath her feet intensifying, rising up in thin strands that wrapped around her form without touching, like light learning her shape. Lucas felt the air shift again, subtle but undeniable, the same presence he had sensed above now pressing closer, filtering through layers of stone and ancient design, searching, adapting. "They are trying to see through this place," he said, his voice tightening slightly as the data in his visor flickered with interference patterns that did not behave like standard scans. Seris closed her eyes for a brief moment, her expression calm but focused. "They cannot," she said softly. "Not unless we allow it." Lucas let out a quiet breath that did not quite become relief. "That sounds like a decision we should be very careful with," he replied, stepping onto the platform beside her before he could second-guess the choice. The moment his foot crossed the boundary, the light reacted, not violently but decisively, surging upward in a brief flare before settling into a steady glow that now surrounded both of them. The connection between them tightened again, clearer this time. Not just shared sensation, but shared awareness. Fragments of perception slipping across the link. Flashes of something vast and ordered. Systems layered within systems. A network that extended far beyond this chamber. Far beyond this planet. Lucas inhaled sharply, his eyes widening as the realization formed faster than he could stop it. "This is not a ruin," he said, his voice almost lost in the quiet. Seris opened her eyes, looking at him with a calm that felt older than the structure itself. "No," she said. "It is a gate." The words settled into the space between them with quiet certainty, and as it did, the light beneath their feet shifted, the patterns aligning into something new, something directional. Lucas turned instinctively toward the far wall as it began to change, the smooth surface separating into segments that slid apart without sound, revealing a deeper corridor filled with a brighter, more focused light that seemed to extend beyond sight itself, not just deeper into the structure, but elsewhere, somewhere distant, somewhere waiting, and behind them, far above. The curious presence in the sky adjusted again, closer now, more precise, as if it had sensed the shift, as if it understood that whatever this place was, it was no longer just hiding them, it was offering them a way out, and Lucas knew with a quiet, unshakable certainty that stepping forward would mean leaving more than just the storm behind. The light beyond the opening did not flicker or pulse like the rest of the structure. It remained steady, constant, like a horizon that did not belong to this world, and Lucas felt his breath slow as he stared into it, the data in his visor struggling to define distance or depth, numbers appearing then dissolving, as if the system itself refused to commit to an answer. "That is not just a corridor," he said quietly, the words grounding him even as everything else slipped out of familiar logic. Seris stood beside him, her posture still but not hesitant, her gaze fixed forward as if she had already stepped through 1,000 times in her mind. "No," she replied softly. "It is a path." Lucas let out a faint breath, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied the edges of the opening where smooth surfaces gave way to something less defined, less solid, like light shaping itself into structure rather than the other way around. "Paths usually go somewhere," he said, his tone steady but edged with something deeper. "Where does this one lead?" For a moment she did not answer, and in that silence he felt the connection between them shift again, not tighter, but clearer, as if whatever link had formed was now settling into something more stable, more deliberate. Fragments of her perception brushing against his awareness, not as words but as impressions, distance measured not in miles but in separation, purpose layered over movement. "Away," she said finally, and the simplicity of the answer carried more weight than any explanation could have. Lucas almost smiled at that, a brief, dry expression that did not reach his eyes. "That is not exactly specific," he replied, glancing back over his shoulder as the chamber behind them dimmed slightly, the light responding to their focus as if encouraging a single direction. "Nothing about this is," she said, and there was a softness in her voice now that had not been there before, something closer to trust than certainty. The presence above pressed again, stronger this time, a subtle pressure against his thoughts that made him inhale sharply, his visor flaring with interference as the distant craft adjusted position, narrowing its search pattern, adapting, learning. "They are getting closer," he said, not needing the data to confirm what he already felt. Seris turned her head slightly, not toward the opening but toward him, her expression calm in a way that did not ignore the danger but accepted it as part of the moment. "They will not stop," she said. Lucas nodded once. That much he understood without translation. He had seen it before in different forms, different worlds, the kind of pursuit that did not rely on anger or urgency, but on inevitability. "Then we do not give them what they expect," he said, the words forming before he fully realized he had made a decision. Seris watched him for a long second, something unreadable passing through her gaze. Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the subtle shifts of color beneath her skin, the way the blue-violet light responded to proximity, to connection. Her hand lifted, hovering for just a moment before resting lightly against his chest, directly over the steady rhythm he now shared with the structure itself. Once we step forward, she said quietly, you cannot return to what you were. Lucas met her eyes, feeling the truth of that settle into him with surprising clarity, not as a warning but as a statement of fact. And for the first time since the storm he did not look away. I do not think I can anyway, he replied, and there was no hesitation left in his voice, only acceptance. She held his gaze for a fraction longer, then withdrew her hand and turned toward the light, stepping forward without looking back. Lucas followed immediately, his boots crossing the threshold as the world shifted, not with force but with precision, the chamber behind them fading into silence as the path ahead unfolded into something vast and unknowable. And in the final moment before the light consumed the edges of his vision, Lucas felt the presence above react, not with anger, not with force, but with something far more unsettling, recognition. The light did not fade when they stepped into it. It expanded, unfolding around them like space turning inside out, and Lucas felt the ground disappear beneath his sense of balance even though his feet still touched something solid, something real. His breath caught halfway as the air shifted from cold metal to something softer, warmer, carrying a faint hum that vibrated through his chest rather than his ears. The data in his visor flickered once, then stabilized into something new, not a map, not coordinates, but a field of layered signals stretching outward in every direction like threads woven through the fabric of reality itself. This is not a place, he said quietly, the realization forming faster than he could stop it. Seris stood just ahead of him, her silhouette outlined in the steady glow, her presence no longer separate from the light, but part of it. Aligned with it. No, she replied, her voice carrying more clearly now, as if the space itself was translating her intent. It is a crossing. Lucas took a slow step forward, the surface beneath his boots responding with a subtle shift, not moving but acknowledging, and with each step the distant threads in his awareness sharpened, resolving into paths, destinations, echoes of worlds he had never seen but somehow understood as real, as reachable. His pulse quickened as fragments of sensation brushed against him, heat from a distant sun, the thin chill of high atmosphere, the quiet pressure of deep water, all layered together without conflict, without confusion. You said it leads away, he said, turning his head slightly toward her. Away to where? Seris did not answer immediately. Instead, she extended her hand into the light, and the threads reacted, bending toward her touch, converging into a single luminous strand that stretched forward into the distance, brighter than the rest, more defined. To where it is needed, she said softly, and there was a weight in her words that settled deep. Lucas frowned slightly, his mind trying to anchor the concept to something practical, something measurable. That sounds like a decision someone else already made, he said. But even as he spoke, he felt the truth shifting beneath the thought, the connection between them pulsing again, not forcing but offering, sharing perspective without overriding his own. Seris turned then, facing him fully, her eyes reflecting the layered light around them, no longer distant or guarded but open in a way that made him hesitate. Not someone else, she said, someone who chose. Lucas held her gaze, feeling the echo of that word resonate through the link between them. Chosen, not selected, not assigned, but chosen, and suddenly the threads around him changed, not physically, but in how he perceived them, possibilities narrowing, aligning, responding to his focus, his intent. He exhaled slowly, the realization settling in with quiet certainty. This thing, he said, glancing around at the vast crossing that stretched beyond sight. It does not decide for us. Seris nodded once, a small, precise motion. It reveals what we are willing to decide. Lucas let out a breath that almost became a laugh, shaking his head slightly. That is a lot of responsibility for someone who just wanted to survive a crash landing, he said, but there was no denial in his tone anymore, only acknowledgement. The presence from before brushed against the edge of his awareness again, faint but persistent, the curious one, still searching, still adapting, but now it felt distant, separated by more than space, as if the crossing itself had placed a boundary between them and the pursuit. Seris stepped closer, her hand lifting once more, not to guide but to offer. hovering between them in quiet invitation. Then choose, she said, her voice steady. Lucas looked at her hand, then at the single luminous path that stretched forward, brighter than all the others. And for a moment everything stilled, the threads, the hum, even the faint pressure of the distant watcher, waiting. And in that silence Lucas Reed understood something simple and undeniable. He had already begun this path the moment he refused to walk away. And stepping forward now was not the start of something new. It was the continuation of a choice he had made long before he knew it mattered. The moment Lucas reached for her hand, the crossing responded, not with light or sound, but with alignment, the single luminous path ahead sharpening into clarity, as if reality itself had just been given permission to commit. His fingers closed around hers, and the connection surged again, deeper this time. No longer just shared awareness, but shared direction. He could feel it now, not as a command, but as a pull, a quiet certainty guiding his focus forward. All right, he said under his breath, more to himself than to her. Let us see where this goes. Seris did not smile, but something in her expression softened, a subtle shift that made her seem less distant, more present. And when she stepped forward this time, he matched her pace without hesitation. The path beneath them did not move, but the space around them did, the layered threads folding inward, narrowing, converging into a corridor of light that stretched ahead like a horizon drawn into a line. Lucas felt the hum intensify, not louder but closer, vibrating through his bones in a steady rhythm that matched the pulse beneath his skin. And as they moved, the impressions grew stronger, no longer fleeting sensations but clearer fragments of place, structures rising against unfamiliar skies, oceans that reflected colors he could not name, cities built on principles he did not yet understand, all of it passing through him without overwhelming, as if the crossing was teaching him how to see. You have done this before, he said, his voice steady despite the shift in everything around him. Seris glanced at him briefly, her gaze thoughtful. No, she replied, but I was raised to understand it. Lucas nodded slowly, absorbing that. And I was not, he said, though there was no frustration in his tone, only quiet recognition. She slowed slightly, just enough for him to feel the adjustment. You understand more than you think, she said, and the connection between them pulsed in agreement. Lucas let out a soft breath, his eyes following the path as it stretched onward. That is either reassuring or very concerning, he replied, and this time there was the faintest hint of warmth in his voice. The path ahead shifted again, not changing direction but refining, the light focusing into a more defined boundary. And at the far edge something began to take shape, not a destination yet, but a threshold, a point where the crossing would resolve into something solid, something real. Lucas felt his chest tighten slightly as the realization settled in. That is where we come out, he said quietly. Seris nodded once, her gaze fixed forward. Yes, she said. And once we do, the path closes. Lucas exhaled slowly, the weight of that statement settling into him. No return, not to this place, not to the moment before the choice. He had known that already, but hearing it spoken made it real in a different way. Then we make it count, he said, more firmly now. And for the first time since they had stepped into the crossing, Seris looked at him not with distance or analysis, but with something closer to trust. That is why it brought us here, she said softly. The presence at the edge of his awareness flickered again, the curious one, still searching, but now it felt farther away, as if the crossing had placed layers between them that could not easily be undone. And yet Lucas knew it was not gone, only delayed, only redirected. The threshold ahead grew clearer, resolving into a surface that looked almost ordinary compared to everything around it. A boundary between light and something else, something grounded. His pulse steadied as he approached it, every instinct sharpening, every sense aligning with the choice he had already made. And as his foot lifted to cross that final distance, he felt the connection between them settle into something new, no longer just a link, but a shared direction that neither of them could walk alone. The threshold did not resist him, it accepted him, and the moment Lucas stepped through, the crossing collapsed behind them without sound, without light, as if it had never existed, the layered threads gone, the hum fading into a distant memory that lingered only in his chest. and suddenly there was gravity again, real and immediate. Pulling at his boots as solid ground met him with undeniable certainty, the air shifted, warmer, thinner, carrying a faint scent of mineral and something unfamiliar that settled at the back of his throat. He inhaled sharply, his visor recalibrating in rapid succession as new data flooded in. Atmospheric composition stable, temperature reading 68 degrees Fahrenheit, gravity slightly lighter than Earth standard, and the sky above him was not gray or storm-filled, but vast and open, streaked with bands of pale gold and deep violet that moved slowly across the horizon like living currents. "We made it," he said quietly, though the words felt smaller than the moment deserved. Seris stepped forward beside him, her posture steady but her expression unreadable as she took in the world around them. The glow beneath her skin adjusting once more, no longer reacting to the crossing but to this place, aligning with it in subtle ways Lucas could now recognize. "Yes," she replied, her voice softer than before. "We did." Lucas turned slowly, taking in their surroundings. A wide plateau of smooth stone stretching outward for miles, broken only by distant structures that rose from the landscape in clean, elegant lines, not ruins, not abandoned, but active, alive in a way that felt deliberate and controlled. Faint lights moved along their surfaces, patterns of motion that suggested purpose without chaos. "This is not some random destination," he said, his mind already piecing together the implications. Seris nodded slightly, her gaze fixed on the nearest structure. "No," she said. "It is one of the places that still listens." Lucas exhaled slowly, the phrase settling into him with a weight he did not yet fully understand. "Listens to what?" he asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. She glanced at him then, her eyes reflecting the shifting colors of the sky. "To choices," she said, and before he could respond, the ground beneath them shifted, not violently, but with intention, a low vibration spreading outward from their position. Lucas stiffened slightly, his instincts flaring as his visor flagged new movement, not from above this time, but from the structures ahead, figures emerging, distant at first, then clearer as they moved closer. Their forms humanoid but distinct, their movements precise, coordinated, not rushed but purposeful. "I am guessing they know we are here," he said, his voice calm but alert. Seris did not look surprised. "They have always known," she replied, and there was no fear in her tone, only acceptance. Lucas watched the approaching figures, his mind running through possibilities, none of them simple, none of them safe. "And are they going to welcome us?" he asked quietly, "or decide we made the wrong choice?" Seris took a step forward, just enough to place herself slightly ahead of him, not as a shield, but as a presence, a signal. "That depends," she said, her voice steady, "on what they see in you." Lucas let out a slow breath, his eyes narrowing slightly as the figures drew closer, their features becoming clearer, their attention fixed not just on Seris, but on him, measuring, assessing, and for the first time since he had stepped through the crossing, Lucas felt something he had not expected, not fear, not doubt, but awareness that this moment, this place, was not the end of the path. It was the point where everything he had chosen would finally be seen. And as the first of the figures stopped a few feet away, their gaze meeting his with quiet intensity, Lucas Reed realized that whatever came next, it would not be decided by power or by fear, but by something far more human than he had ever imagined mattered in a universe like this. The figure stopped just within arm's reach, close enough for Lucas to see the subtle shifts beneath its surface, skin that was not quite solid, not quite light, like something choosing a form rather than being bound to one, its eyes steady, not hostile, not welcoming, simply present, and when it spoke the sound did not come from its mouth alone, it resonated through the air itself, clear and measured. "You carry a signal that does not belong to your origin." Lucas felt the words settle into him without resistance, his mind translating meaning faster than language. He exhaled slowly, keeping his posture steady even as every instinct told him this moment mattered more than anything before it. "I did not ask for it," he said, his voice calm, unforced. Seris did not interrupt, but he could feel her attention beside him, not guiding, not shielding, simply there. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering the response, That is noted, it replied. And for a brief second Lucas almost smiled at the simplicity of it. Almost. Then why am I here? He asked, not challenging, not defensive, just direct, because that was all he had left to stand on. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead it extended its awareness outward, and Lucas felt it, not invasive, not intrusive, but present, like a question asked without words. Something brushing against his thoughts, his memories, not searching for secrets but for intent, for weight, for the shape of his choices. He did not resist it, not because he trusted it, but because he understood something now. This was not a test of strength, it was a reflection of what he had already chosen to be. The silence stretched just long enough to feel intentional. Then the figure spoke again. You intervened without gain, accepted risk without calculation, and maintained direction without certainty. Lucas let out a quiet breath, his gaze steady. I did what needed to be done, he said. Simply. The figure regarded him for a moment longer, then shifted its attention to Seris. And you brought him, it said. Seris inclined her head slightly, her voice calm. He brought himself, she replied, and there was something in the way she said it that carried quiet conviction. The figure returned its focus to Lucas, and this time there was something different in its presence. Not approval, not yet, but recognition. The ones who follow you will not stop, it said. Lucas nodded once. I figured that out, he replied, glancing briefly toward the horizon where the sky remained calm but not empty. He could feel it now, faint but persistent, the distant presence pressing against the edges of this place, searching for a way through, adapting. Then you understand the cost. The figure continued. Lucas met its gaze, the answer forming before doubt could take hold. I understand enough, he said, and for the first time since the encounter began, the figure stepped slightly aside, not retreating, but creating space, a path opening behind it that led toward the structures in the distance, subtle, unspoken, but clear. Seris shifted beside him, her presence steady, her voice quiet. They will not offer this twice. Lucas glanced at her, then back at the path, feeling the weight of the moment settle into something solid, something real, not forced, not demanded, simply there, waiting for him to choose again. He stepped forward without hesitation, crossing the space between them as the figure watched, silent, observing, and as he passed, the presence brushed against him one last time, not questioning now, but confirming. And in that instant Lucas understood something that settled deeper than any fear he had carried. This was not about surviving what came next. It was about what he would choose to protect when everything else was uncertain, and as the path ahead opened fully before him, leading into a place that felt less like a refuge and more like a responsibility, Lucas Reed did not look back. The path did not feel like a path the deeper Lucas walked. It felt like a decision unfolding beneath his feet, each step carrying weight not from the ground, but from what it meant to continue. The structures ahead rising taller now, their surfaces alive with shifting patterns that responded to his presence in subtle waves, not reacting with alarm or resistance, but with awareness, as if they were measuring something beyond his movement. Seris walked beside him in silence, her pace steady, her gaze forward, but the connection between them spoke in ways words no longer needed to, a quiet alignment of intent that had replaced uncertainty with something more deliberate. This place does not just observe, Lucas said after a while, his voice low but certain. It remembers. Seris nodded once, her expression calm. It preserves outcomes, she replied, and the phrasing settled into him with quiet gravity. Outcomes, not attempts, not intentions alone, but the result of what was chosen when it mattered. Lucas exhaled slowly, the air warm against his face as the distant structures began to open, their surfaces parting in smooth, silent motions to reveal a vast interior space filled with soft, layered light, not bright enough to blind, but clear enough to reveal everything within it. Without shadow, figures stood there, not many, but enough to create presence, each one different in form yet unified in stillness, their attention already focused on him before he fully stepped inside. I am starting to understand, he said quietly, though the words felt incomplete even as he spoke them. Seris glanced at him briefly. Understanding is not required, she said. Only clarity. Lucas let out a faint breath that almost became a laugh. "Those are not the same thing," he replied. But there was no resistance in his tone anymore, only acceptance of the difference. As they moved into the center of the space, the light shifted again, not intensifying but concentrating, forming a subtle circle around him. Not a barrier, not a cage, but a boundary of focus. The figures around them did not move, did not speak, yet their presence pressed gently against his awareness, not demanding, not judging, simply present, waiting. And in that waiting, Lucas felt something surface inside him that had been buried beneath survival, beneath instinct, beneath the constant need to react instead of choose. He felt the weight of every moment that had led him here, not as regret, not as doubt, but as confirmation. "They are not asking questions," he said softly, his eyes moving from one figure to another. "They already know the answers." Seris did not step into the circle with him. She remained just outside it, her posture still, her presence steady but separate. "They are waiting for you to say them," she replied. Lucas closed his eyes for a brief moment, the silence settling around him in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. No alarms, no storm, no pursuit pressing at the edges of his awareness. Only the steady rhythm beneath his skin and the quiet expectation of what came next. When he opened his eyes again, he did not look at the figures. He looked forward, into the center of the light, and spoke without raising his voice. "I did not save her because she was important," he said. The words clear, unforced. "I saved her because leaving her there would have meant becoming someone I am not willing to be." The light shifted slightly, not brighter, but more defined, as if the space itself had acknowledged the shape of what he had said. Lucas continued, his voice steady. "I do not understand your systems, your paths, or what you expect from me, but I understand this." He paused for just a fraction of a second, not searching for the words but choosing them. "If what follows us threatens what we are trying to protect, then I will stand in its way, not because I can win, but because it is the right thing to do." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, layered with something deeper than sound. And for the first time since he had stepped into this place, Lucas felt something shift that did not come from the structures, the figures, or the distant presence beyond the sky. It came from within him, a quiet, undeniable certainty that he had just crossed a line that could not be undone, and whatever happened next would not be a test of whether he was strong enough, but whether he was willing to remain exactly who he had just chosen to be. The light did not react immediately after he spoke, and that was what made the moment heavier, not emptier, the silence holding his words in place as if weighing them, not against expectation but against something deeper, something that did not change easily. Lucas remained still within the circle, his breath steady, his gaze forward, and for the first time since stepping into this place he did not feel observed. He felt acknowledged. The figures around him shifted almost imperceptibly, not moving in space but in presence, their attention narrowing, focusing, aligning with the shape of what he had said. And then the light responded, not with brightness but with structure, the patterns along the floor and walls converging inward, forming a single, defined axis that extended from where he stood toward the far end of the chamber, a path, but not the same kind he had followed before. This one did not lead away, it led through. "You have declared a boundary." The voice came again, not from one figure but from the space itself, layered, unified, and accepted its consequence. Lucas exhaled slowly, the words settling into him without resistance. "I did," he replied, and there was no hesitation in it. Only clarity. Seris remained just outside the circle, but he could feel her now more clearly than ever, not through touch, but through something quieter, something that carried intent rather than sensation. Her presence steady, not interfering, not guiding, simply there. Then the structure aligns. The voice continued, and the axis of light intensified slightly, not overwhelming, but undeniable. Lucas glanced toward it, his mind already understanding what was being offered before it was fully explained. "You are giving me a way to stand," he said, not as a question. The figures did not move, but the space answered. "We are giving you the means to remain consistent with your declaration." Lucas almost smiled at that, a brief, quiet expression that came and went like a breath. "That sounds like a more complicated way of saying the same thing," he said, but there was no sarcasm in it, only recognition. The presence beyond the sky pressed again, stronger now, closer than before, the curious one no longer distant. Its awareness brushing against the edges of this place with increased precision, searching for weakness, for access, for understanding. Lucas felt it clearly now, not as threat, but as inevitability. They are almost here, he said, turning his attention back to the axis of light. Seris stepped forward then, just enough to stand beside him at the edge of the circle, her voice calm, but carrying something deeper, something personal. "This is where it changes," she said quietly. Lucas glanced at her, meeting her eyes, and in that moment the connection between them shifted again, no longer just shared direction, but shared weight. "For both of us," he replied, and she nodded once, a small, precise motion that carried more agreement than words could hold. The axis of light responded to their alignment, the path sharpening, extending beyond the chamber into something that felt less like space and more like purpose. Lucas stepped forward without waiting for instruction, his boots crossing the boundary of the circle as the light adjusted around him, not restraining, not guiding, but supporting, matching his movement, reinforcing his direction, and as he moved, the awareness of the distant presence sharpened in response, the curious one reacting, adjusting, accelerating, but not with anger, with focus. "It is learning you," the voice said, not as a warning, but as information. Lucas nodded once, his gaze fixed forward. "Then it will learn something worth remembering," he said, and there was no defiance in it, only certainty. Seris moved with him, not ahead, not behind, but beside. Their pace aligned as the path carried them forward into the next space, where the light deepened, the structure intensified, and the distance between what was coming and what they had chosen to protect collapsed into something immediate, something real. And in that narrowing space, Lucas Reed understood that this was no longer about reaching a destination. It was about holding a line that he had drawn himself and refusing to step back from it no matter what arrived on the other side. The path ended without warning, not in a wall, not in a barrier, but in open space, a wide expanse where the light thinned just enough to reveal what stood beyond it. And Lucas felt it before he fully saw it. The presence that had followed them now no longer distant, no longer filtered. But here, on the other side of the line he had chosen to hold, it did not descend from the sky or break through the ground. It simply existed, a shape that resisted definition, shifting at the edges of perception as if reality itself was adjusting to contain it. And yet its attention was clear, focused entirely on him. The air grew still, not tense, not hostile, but precise, like a moment balanced on a single point of decision. Lucas slowed but did not stop, his boots carrying him forward until he stood at the edge of the light, Seris beside him, her presence steady, her silence no longer uncertain but resolved. The connection between them quiet and unbroken. "So this is it," Lucas said, softly, not as a challenge, not as surrender, but as acknowledgement. The presence did not respond with sound, but the space around them shifted, a subtle compression that made every breath feel more deliberate, more chosen. And then it answered, not in words but in understanding that settled directly into his awareness, a question without language, a single, clear inquiry. "What defines your boundary?" Lucas exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had led him here settle into something simple, something unshakable. He did not look away, did not step back. "The same thing that brought me here," he said quietly, his voice steady. "I do not leave people behind." The presence shifted, not recoiling, not advancing, but considering, the space around it tightening and loosening in subtle patterns that echoed the structure he had walked through, as if it was adapting, learning, not just what he said, but what he meant. Seris moved then, just slightly, her hand brushing against his for the briefest moment, not to guide, not to warn, but to affirm, and Lucas felt the connection between them settle into something final, not fragile, not uncertain, but chosen. "Then your boundary is not a line." The presence responded, its meaning forming with quiet clarity. "It is a direction." Lucas nodded once, a small motion, but certain. "Yeah," he said, "that sounds about right." The silence that followed was not empty. It was complete, and for a long moment nothing moved, nothing pressed, nothing demanded, until slowly, almost imperceptibly, the presence shifted its focus, not away from him, but around him, past him, toward what lay behind, toward what he had chosen to protect, and then it stopped, its awareness settling into something new, not withdrawn, not defeated, but changed, as if it had reached a conclusion that did not require force, only recognition. The pressure in the air eased, not disappearing, but transforming into something that no longer sought to cross the line he had drawn, and Lucas felt it. The difference, the absence of pursuit, not because it could not continue, but because it chose not to. He let out a slow breath he had not realized he was holding, his shoulders easing just slightly, not in relief, but in acceptance. Beside him, Seris watched the space where the presence had been most defined, her expression calm, but her eyes reflecting something deeper, something almost like understanding. "It will remember," she said quietly. Lucas nodded, his gaze still forward. "So will I," he replied. The light around them softened, not fading, but settling, the path behind them gone, the one ahead no longer necessary. And in that quiet space between what had been and what would come next, Lucas Reed stood not as someone who had conquered anything, not as someone who had changed the universe, but as someone who had reminded it of something it had nearly forgotten, that strength was not always measured by what you could take or break, but by what you refused to abandon. And as the distant sky shifted above them, no longer searching, no longer closing in, but simply watching, the moment held, silent and complete, and in that silence, it was enough.